Hello and welcome to TİDex Professional Talks. My name is Umut Erdemir. I am head of internal audit at Istanbul Sabiha Gökçen International Airport, and I served as a board member at TİDE, the Institute of Internal Auditors Turkey chapter, in the previous term. Today, we are going to talk about the features of an effective GRC system. But before that, I would like to thank all the professionals and volunteers of TİDE for organizing this magnificent series of events named TİDex Talks, and of course, giving me the opportunity to be the moderator for today's session. Now, as I mentioned, today our topic is the features of an effective GRC system. And for this reason, we have two distinguished professionals from Med Group. Firstly, we have Mr. Muhammed-Nasır Barakat. He is a partner of Med AIGC with his 25 years of experience in auditing, banking, and risk management. And before joining Med Group, he was the partner and service line leader for the Middle East Business Risk Services at Grant Thornton. He had implemented GRC systems in a number of well-known organizations across the Middle East. He supervised the implementation of operational risk management systems in more than 30 banks in the region. He has CPA and CCSA designations. So welcome, Mr. Barakat. And also we have Mr. Attayeb Zahran. He is a consultancy manager at Med AIGC with his 10 years of experience in the fields of compliance and risk management. Before joining Med Group, he worked for the Central Bank of Jordan and contributed to the implementation of the operational risk management framework, loss data collection, and business continuity management. He is experienced in conducting risk assessment workshops and risk-based internal audits for banking and governmental institutions. He is a CIA and CRMA. Welcome, Mr. Zahran. Many thanks to you for being with us today. So I want to give a brief introduction and then pass it to our speakers. I'm sure we all heard about GRC at some point while performing our profession. Simply speaking, governance, risk, and compliance activities are interconnected by nature and rely on common sets of information and processes. It refers to a strategy for managing an organizational overall governance, enterprise risk management, and compliance with regulations. And today's rapidly changing business environment requires thinking about risk in new ways, taking an innovative approach to managing and enhancing your GRC activities can help you seize opportunities and eventually overcome uncertainty. So having said this, I don't want to take much time, and I would like to start with Mr. Muhammed-Nasır. So, Mr. Barakat, I know that you have a presentation about the features of an effective GRC system today. Please, can you give us some feedback about an effective GRC system and its benefits?
Thank you, Mr. Umut, for the introduction, and thanks to TİDE for hosting us today. This very important subject, in fact. The presentation today is designed to answer your question as to what are the main features of a GRC system. And I want to give just a notice to everyone in advance that because of the size of the subject and the diverse elements in it, we won't be able to cover everything today in 14 minutes. So we will try as much as possible to concentrate on the key elements, components, and features of the GRC system. So stay with us, and towards the end, we will have a session for questions and answers. And in that, if I still haven't answered all of your questions or expectations, please feel free to ask them in the end as well. So just a brief about who we are and what we do. We as AIGC are present in the and have offices in multiple locations. Recently decided to enter the Turkish market with our partners in Alinial Global. Our partners are Med Group, and they are experts in accounting and advisory services, as well as data analytics, bookkeeping, and auditing as well. We provide many services, but AIGC concentrates mainly on risk compliance and internal audit services, solutions, and tools as well. Now, Today, we will be covering, as you correctly said, a very important subject, which is the components or features of an effective GRC system. And, you know, there will be 6 sections in total. Section number 1 will be the main components of an effective GRC system. Section 2 are the key features, general features of a Section 3 will be about enterprise risk management features. Section 4, internal audit features. Section 5, compliance features. And finally, a summary and questions and answers. So moving on to the first section of the presentation, what are the main components of a GRC system? Now, when we say GRC system, we're really talking about managing the risks that the organization faces. And when we say managing risks, although people misconceptually think that risk management is in charge of managing risks, it's actually a collaborative thing or a collaborative activity that happens across many business units in the organization. So the business units, managers and staff are involved. Senior management have a role. Risk management monitors this. Internal audit has a role. Compliance, anti-money laundering unit, and others. They need to work collaboratively in order to better manage the risks facing the organizations, in order to identify, assess, and do something about these risks before it's too late. To do that, a GRC system should be designed in the following manner. That's a very important slide because everything else will be built on it. In the middle, you see the risk register. And the risk register, the main purpose of having a risk register is to predict the future, okay? It's forward-looking, trying to predict the future. Using the risk register, you want to know what could possibly happen in the organization that negatively impacts on the objectives of the organization, okay? To be able to predict the future, there are 3 main tools that the organization needs to have to predict the future. One of them is a CRSA tool, the other is key risk indicator monitoring, and the third is loss prediction. Loss prediction is basically using the old event historical data to predict the future. However, to be able to have this risk register as fine-tuned as possible, so its predictive ability of the future is accurate, you need to do what we call testing of controls, compliance testing, and event tracking as well. So it's not enough to have a risk register and say, I have my risk, this risk is low impact, low probability. You need to track the risks. So if with time you find out that a certain risk has happened 10 times last year and every time costing you $100,000, you need to refine your risk register and fix it by moving this risk from low impact, low probability to high impact, high probability. And thus the predictive ability of the future will be more accurate. So some components will be forward-looking, some components will be backward-looking. There are 3 main components also, some tools forward-looking and some tools backward-looking, but there are 3 main components of a GRC system. Enterprise risk management component, allowing risk management staff and managers to do their duties. Compliance risk monitoring component, and risk-based internal audit component. In addition to these tools and components, a good GRC system should have proper reporting, email alerts, and notifications to allow every manager and every control department manager like risk, internal audit, and compliance to know about exceptions before it's too late. So with these main components, we need to think how they can work together, okay? We go back to the 3 lines model recommended by the Institute of Internal Audit. The first line is where the business unit managers are involved. The business unit managers in this case will use the CRSA component for them to understand their risks. They also will use the key risk indicator tool to monitor their risks continuously. The second line is where the risk management department and compliance functions come in. They will use the component of risk, enterprise risk, and risk and the compliance risk monitoring to monitor what's happening in the organization and monitor these risks. They will also use the KRIs and loss prediction capability of the system. And finally, the third line of defense is the internal audit, where they monitor the first two lines that they are working effectively. And to do that, they use the risk-based internal audit component of the system. With this short introduction, but I would say important introduction, we get to the main features that you should be looking for in a GRC system. Now, a GRC system, and while I'm explaining the main features of a GRC system, I'm sharing with you examples from a system that we tend to use all the time, which is CareWell. This system has those features, and as a result, accordingly, we are taking some photos or images and sharing them with you so you have a practical idea as to what we are talking about. So one element, one key feature, or general feature of a successful or effective GRC system is to have a proper dashboard that continuously shows you a bird's eye view of what's happening in the organization. You know, the organization, generally speaking, has thousands of risks. You need to be able to have a bird's eye view, seeing what's happening with the remedial actions, what's happening with risks, what's happening with events, other events there that we need to know of. What about remedial actions? Have they been implemented? What about compliance tests of controls? Are they being conducted by the business unit and so on? So the dashboard will help you a lot. There should be multiple dashboards to serve different purposes. The business unit will have its own dashboards, risk management, internal audit, compliance, and so on. Now, it should fully support CRSA, and we said already about the CRSA as a tool where you get the business unit involved in capturing, assessing risks, and monitoring controls. It should have the ability to link risks to objectives and objectives to strategies. I mean, risks negatively impact on the organization's objectives, and objectives are linked to strategies. So if you have a strategy with so many risks that are not controlled properly, this means that the strategy will not be achieved because there will be so many errors, events, negative incidents that will cause this strategy not to be achieved. So in here, you can see this graph, for example, showing you the objective and the distribution of risks, whether they are high importance, medium, and low, and what kind of control we have on these risks, whether they are well controlled, not controlled, and so on. A good GRC system will help you quantify the gap in the control environment. Why do we need to quantify the gap? Because with so many risks relating to every business unit, you need to be able to have a certain ability to monitor quickly how good or bad this business unit is. So with this percentage gap in the control environment, by quantifying the risks and quantifying the gap in the control environment, you'll be able to see how good or bad the control environment is, and you'll be able to rank the business units based on how good or bad their control environment is. So the worst in this case is sales department. Second to that will be risk management, and then cards, and then treasury. You can also get a rating on the environment based on how big the gaps are. Now, GRC systems should also differentiate between weaknesses resulting from lack of controls versus weaknesses resulting from controls not working as intended. And that's a very important feature, because if a weakness results from lack of controls, this means that we still need to make an investment, pay money, invest money to implement additional controls. While if it is the latter, this means that the control is there, but it's not being implemented properly. So we just need to train the people and do whatever is necessary to bring it back to work as intended. A good GRC system will help you in defining the various standards and frameworks you want to follow and be able to follow them. For example, when it comes to financial institutions, banks particularly, they want to be able to categorize and see their risk from a Basel risk listing perspective. Again, because of the multiple risks and because of the need to report at various levels in the organization, you need to be able to define the organizational hierarchy and report at various levels in the organization. And most importantly, because of the diverse nature of reports that risk, internal audit, and compliance need to produce, you have to have a system that allows you to export this data on Excel, on Word, or any other tool that will help you in reporting to other parties. Now, after we've introduced, again, I would say some of the key features and general key features, we want to look at what are some of the key features from an enterprise risk management component of the system. Now, the system should allow for capturing different asset types. And I'll explain to you what that means. Risks impact on different assets or resources of the organization. So for example, if a risk impacts on the physical assets, meaning the buildings, the machinery, that's a risk, that's a physical asset component that is impacted. Other risks might impact on your goodwill. They might create bad reputation for the organization. So you have another asset called reputation. And a third asset might be the employees. We might lose employees. Like with the COVID-19 situation, some of the employees were out of work for a period of time. So different risks impact on different assets or resources that the organization relies on in conducting its work. Those assets vary in their importance from one organization to another. For example, when it comes to financial institutions, goodwill and reputation might be the highest important asset, while, for example, physical assets, the tables, the chairs, might be less important, the least important. So when you give a weight to a particular asset, the system will take it into consideration when deciding on the importance of risk and prioritization of these risks. Again, the system should allow you to categorize risks so you are able to produce various types of report by risk category. A common challenge when managing risks is that some systems will ask you whether you want to link the risk to a business unit versus to a process or product. You should have the ability to link it to a business unit so the unit manager is in charge of managing his own risks. But at the same time, you should be able to capture the risk or link the risks to various processes and products. So you are able also to see all the risks relating to a process or product end-to-end across many business units, how well they are controlled. For example, here we have a process that a number of entities are linked to, and the risks in these entities are listed in here, and whether they are tested, untested, in a controlled environment for each of these risks. As we said earlier, you should be able to have a tool in the GRC system to capture and monitor key risk indicators. And again, when I say key risk indicators, there will be more than one key risk indicator that can be linked to one risk. So the system should allow for this. Not only that, it should allow you to give weights to these key risk indicators based on their ability to predict the future of that risk happening or not happening. So for example, if a key risk indicator is strongly correlated to a risk, it will get a bigger weight. And the system will then calculate the overall KRI status and will show you the overall KRI status as seen in this picture here, based on multiple KRIs relating to or connected to the same risk. It should also allow you to classify controls based on whether they are preventative, corrective, detective, deterrent, and so on, and score the effectiveness of controls in mitigating risks. Again, a good system will allow you to score, whether the control is strongly mitigating the risk, moderately mitigating the risk, or weakly mitigating the risk. Whatever the situation is, you should be able to score that, and the system should be able to calculate whether these controls are sufficient to mitigate the risks or not. There are different types of controls, but some controls are mandated by the regulator. The regulator insists on having those controls in place. Those are, we call them mandated controls. If you need to be able to capture these separately, because by not implementing, by not having these controls in place, it automatically means that you are breaching the regulatory requirements. So the system should be able to tell you whether this is a mandated control or not. And if it is a mandated control, you would concentrate on that control a bit better. The system should allow you to assign compliance tests or test of controls to the business unit manager to test his own controls periodically, because this is the way to move accountability to that manager, as we said earlier, as a first line of defense. It should allow you to schedule the tests for specific dates and for the manager to conduct these tests on these dates as well. If he doesn't, the system will send him notifications and alerts that he should be doing that. You also need to have the ability to link controls to predefined control categories. Not only whether the control is preventative, corrective, detective, deterrent, but also you could have different types of categories. For example, segregation of duties is one category versus dual control on a transaction is another category, and subcategories as well. If you go, you can also have the system link your categories to different frameworks. For example, the COBIT framework, the NEST framework. These will allow you, if it's an IT control, to link it based on different frameworks, and as a result, be able to report on whether you are in compliance with that framework or we are in line with the framework sound practices. And finally, as we said earlier, event tracking is very important in fine-tuning the risk register and the risk database. And accordingly, you should be able to track the events if they occur, the incidents if they occur. You should be able to analyze why they happened using this module. You should be able to decide whether the control that we originally scored as strong should be downgraded. And you should be able to also remedial actions to prevent the event from happening again. Now, we move to the key features of the internal audit component of the system. And when we say the internal audit component, this would be the third line of defense. Again, as you can see, there has to be a dashboard monitoring different elements. But the most important part of it is the risk-based internal audit component should follow the internal audit process, the risk-based internal audit process from planning, risk-based internal audit planning, to risk-based internal audit execution, and risk-based internal audit reporting. So the system should cover all elements using the risk data. To develop an annual plan, using the risk data, the system will tell you how good or bad the control environment is, but it will allow you to also enter other factors to determine how important each business unit is. For example, complexity of the transactions, how complex the transactions processed by a business units are. Throughput, the volume of transactions processed by the business unit. The average value of a transaction processed by the business unit. How stable is this business unit? Is it new or old? Does it have policies and procedures or not? And so on. Is the management new or an old management team, well experienced? How is the control environment? And finally, time since last audit. Based on whatever you enter in here, the system will automatically prioritize for you whether this is a very important entity or unit for you to audit or less important. 5 stars is not good like hotels. 5 stars means it has to be audited quickly. It's a risky area. Then you will use your resources. You have another screen to capture what resources you have and then decide on the annual plan, linking the resources to the various audits that you have and decide whether you need additional resources or not. This should be all done within the system as part of your annual internal audit planning. It should allow you to schedule audits. And you can see here that in the calendar view screen, some audits are scheduled, they are done on time. Some are scheduled but are late, we haven't started auditing them. And some are in yellow, which means they are in progress. So you should be able to schedule audits. You should be able to assign the audit tests to the team members and the team leader for them to conduct these tests. They just go into their My Test screen, click on it, and be able to conduct the tests immediately. As I said earlier, it should allow you for, when you schedule a test, you assign the audit test to the team. The team just need to just go into the test result. They see the audit program in front of them here. They enter the test results here. And based on whatever they enter, the system will send the result to the manager for him to put his reply. And accordingly, the system will be able to produce the report in the end, highlighting the finding and the management reply as well. Now, there is a process where the finding is then sent to the team leader for him to review it. And the team leader will then verify it, agrees with it. If he doesn't, he will send it back to the auditor for him to fix it and so on. Allows for customizing and generating internal audit reports. So as we were working, the system already has the risk data in it. The system already has information about the business unit. You've already entered your findings. The managers have already entered their replies to your findings. So now it's very easy. With a click of a button, you can generate the internal audit report based on standard templates. You can define as many templates as you want. Once the template is defined, the system will collect the data and produce the report for you. So that increases the productivity for internal audit dramatically. And finally, for an internal audit manager, he wants to be able to see how productive his team members are. So how many tests were assigned to each team member, how many of them were conducted, how many of them were not conducted, were late, and what are the levels of findings, whether they are important findings, less important findings, and so on. So the system should allow you to get that information. Now, the third component is the compliance system. I will ask my colleague, Attayeb, he is the specialist in this area, to introduce that part to us as well.
Thank you, Mr. Muhammed Barakat. I'm going to talk about the most important features that should exist in an effective compliance system. We all know that for maybe the compliance professionals and also the companies, nowadays tracking the compliance issues and the regulations seems very challenging, especially with the rapid changes and continuous changes in the regulations and in the market. So how a compliance officer or manager can track all these changes, the regulatory requirements that the company should adhere to, and how to ensure that the business owners are aware of the compliance changes, the compliance risks that they are facing. For that to be effectively and efficiently monitored, an effective compliance system should be flexible enough to allow for adding all the regulators and regulations that are applicable to the company. So the system should include that library of regulations, and also should include, as a second feature, a library of the compliance risks the compliance risk and the controls that are mandated by the regulations and the regulator. This library can be used by the compliance officers and compliance manager to be linked with the relevant business units. The compliance officer or the manager can assign the relevant compliance risks to the business units, and also the mandated controls to these business units, and to assess the compliance risk and to build the compliance risk profile for each business unit. Also, the business units in that case will be aware of their compliance risk, and they will be aware of the regulatory requirements that they are required to adhere to. And as we know that all the regulators keep updating their regulations, so an effective compliance system should also accommodate for updating the regulations, adding revisions, circulars, and also notifying the relevant business owners about these changes and revisions and circulars, and obtain as well the business owners' acknowledgements and confirmation that they received and understand the regulatory changes or the circulars. So this is a very important also feature should be in any effective compliance system. Based on the compliance risk profiles that the compliance officer and manager built for each business unit, they can actually develop the compliance monitoring programs, which includes all the tests that they need to conduct to ensure that each business unit is compliant with the regulatory requirements. They are implementing the mandated controls. They are and their compliance risks are well controlled and mitigated. So any effective system should include the ability or should enable the compliance officers to build the compliance monitoring programs, and also to allow for the compliance manager to assign the responsibility of conducting this program and the tests, to assign these activities to the relevant members within the compliance team. In addition, an effective system should also allow for documenting the regulatory breaches, maintaining a log of all the regulatory incidents in order to allow for estimating maybe the cost and the impact of such breaches, and also to follow up on the remedial actions relating to these breaches. The final important feature in any effective compliance system that the system should also send automatic alerts to the relevant business owners in a timely manner in order to notify them about important issues relating to compliance, such as non-compliance status or exceptions notified by the compliance officers while testing the compliance status. So these exceptions or non-compliance status should be remediated by the business owners. The system can send them alerts or notify them about these exceptions and ask them to take the required actions in a timely manner. Also, maybe reminders can be sent also to the business owners for them to conduct the self-assessment or self-certification that they are compliant with the regulatory requirements. And most importantly, the submission deadlines of the regulatory reports. So the system should have the feature of sending alerts and notifying the relevant stakeholders and compliance officers about the deadlines of the regulatory reports. So these were just important features. These are not all the features that should be included in any compliance system, but these are very essential and important features should be existed in any compliance system. Of course, the full spectrum of compliance features are still progressing in the market day after day. For the concluding remarks, I leave the floor to Mr. Muhammad Barakat.
Thank you, Attayeb. In summary, what are we trying to achieve here? What we are trying to achieve is this, okay? So with worst case scenario, I'm sure your organizations are much better than that, but worst case scenario is an organization that keeps having incidents, that keeps having, when I say operational incidents, I'm talking about fraud cases, loss events, errors, customer dissatisfaction events, so many errors that the bucket is full of holes and it keeps dripping water. So whatever you put in here by way of revenue, you're not going to be able to sustain it, okay? By implementing a proper GRC system that is effective enough and follows the 3 lines of defense module, you're going to move from here to there, where you save a lot on the potential losses and events and incidents that could happen in the organization and diverge it from achieving its objectives. So that's the aim of having, that's the general aim of having an effective GRC system in place. Now, I think we are ready to move to the Q&A questions and answers session. So please go ahead and send your questions or to the chat area, or let us know how you want to proceed with this.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen, for this fascinating presentation. Yes, please, our audience, please feel free to write your questions here so that I can relay them to our speakers. But by the way, I have one question.
Please.
What is we have seen the benefits of effective GRC to internal audit in the presentation, but what is the role of internal audit in maintaining effective GRC system across the organization?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question, actually. For the GRC system, if you remember in the first slide, we did talk about collaboration among different areas, different departments. Each department has its own role to play for the GRC system to work. For example, when it comes to identifying risks, risk management should not be doing it alone. It should be doing it through interaction with the business units. They should be capturing risks. The business unit should be reporting events. If they don't report events for us to know that an event has happened and we revise our database accordingly, we have a problem. So that this interaction is very important for the GRC system to work. Internal audit independently checks that every single party of those are doing their role the right manner. So internal audit is the party that verifies that all of this is happening and each one of those important functions is doing his job and is doing his part correctly. Now, internal audit has a lot to benefit from this, because if the GRC system works effectively, the risk data, which is very valuable for the internal audit, for them to save time and to save their effort in planning and executing their assignments, will be up to date, and they will be in a position to rely on this data and conduct more effective and efficient audits as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I am checking the chat box whether there is a question or not. Okay, if not, then I have another one for you.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, I'm wondering what to look for when implementing a GRC system. Where to start? Who should initiate it, and where to start?
So it is a collaborative effort. So the first element of the GRC system is to build the risk database. So when you want to build the risk database, risk management will be our champion or the facilitator. It's not the only, it's not their responsibility alone, because as we said earlier, risk identification, assessment has to be engaged with the business. Internal audit has to be present. Compliance function has to also be present, so they capture the various types of risks. Internal audit will discuss and agree on the risks as well, because they need to give their opinion on the risks. Otherwise, how can they rely on the risk database? So risk management will lead this exercise to build the risk register. You remember in the picture where we had the cylinder in the middle, the risk register in the middle? So risk management function will lead this. They will start by building the risk register, the risks, the controls, mitigating the risks, and so on. Now, once the risk register is built, compliance will also build what we call the regulatory risks register as well, which is part of the big risk register. And then things will start flowing from here. So that would be where we would start.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So any questions? No. It is very well understood, I guess, from your...
I hope so. I really enjoy being here. It's always a pleasure to be with TİDE. This is the second time we present on TİDE. And we look forward for more events in the future, inshallah.
Yeah. Just one more question. I don't want to interrupt your valuable presentation, so I kept my questions to the end. What do you think biggest obstacle on road to effective GRC system, based on your experience?
Okay. Actually, there are more than one, but I will share with you the most important one is management and the board support. So senior management and the board are critical to support this. Have an effective implementation to support this project by giving it the right resources. And senior management needs to empower people to dedicate the time needed to assess risks. You know, they need to also give their input when it comes to remedial actions, because some remedial actions require investment in implementing the recommendations. And also there is synergy to happen and dialogue to happen between the various business units. Senior management will orchestrate that. So empowerment and senior management support and the board as well support is key to the success of this. If it's not there, then the project will struggle.
Right. I think now we have some questions.
Please.
First one from Mr. Suleyman Bash. Can we say that GRC are suitable for those mature organizations, those who have risk management, compliance, etc., that good governance practices?
Well, you know, GRC systems need or help get you to that maturity level. So to get to the maturity level, you need to understand, you know, whatever the size of the organization, if you are early in the maturity area, you need the GRC system to reach to that level. When I say system, you know, I'm just saying you could start with risk management and then add compliance and then add internal audit, but you have to have something in place where you understand your risks, because without understanding your risks, it's like, you know, walking in the dark. So you have to understand your risks and you have to build slowly to reach to the maturity level. Consider the GRC system is just a highway to help you quickly reach to a higher maturity level. Otherwise, it will take you more time, effort, and it will not be an easy journey for you.
Thank you. And we have one thanks from one of our audience. Thank you all very much. I am an internal auditor from Mardin Metropolitan Municipality. It is really so beneficial. So we thank you, Mr. Bilal.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay.
Have a question?
So, I don't know, just one more check, but no. So, okay, thank you very much for sharing your experience with us today. It was a fascinating presentation and session. So as a token of thanks, 3 saplings were gifted to your name from TİDE 250-year Memorial Forest in Şile, Istanbul.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. That's very nice. Thank you very much. Very generous.
You're welcome. And also many thanks to our audience. And I would like to remind you that the next TİDex talk will be about sustainability on 17th of March, Thursday at 11 a.m. Our panelists will be Mr. Edis Günsel, who is the Vice President of Sustainable Development Association and the partner of PwC. So by then, stay safe and healthy. So goodbye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.